Can we hear it for our friends in McAllen, Texas? Huh? Have they done a great job or what? Oh, my goodness. You know, again, I really want to thank all of our folks in McAllen, Texas, and all the support team that we've had, but I really want to thank you guys. Because I tell you, one of the things that we really kind of stressed about over this whole process was we know how busy this year's been. With the legislative session going on and all the conferences and all the different events, everybody is pulling the strings of your time, right? But the fact that you chose to be here with us, you know, we really appreciate that. We take a lot of, you know, we just, again, I always joke with people and say we're the hired help. We work for you guys. So when we put this survey out, the way you can help us is tell us what you like, but more importantly, tell us what we need to improve on, because that's how we make this better for you. So if you like something, say get a little more of this. If you don't like something, say a little less of that. Don't be too mean about it, but, you know, just but be honest. The other thing I want to say, you guys have all had the opportunity to see me and Jason Roy on the stage at the same time. We are different people, okay? So Jason Roy from Model 1 is a different guy. So what I'd like to do now is I want to introduce our closing session. We're going to kind of move this along really quickly. We understand that you guys are probably getting kind of saturated at this point, but we got a great big night out. These folks have worked on it. If you look on the back of most of your passes, it tells you it's not La Quinta. I'm going to ask for some help on saying this again. It is Quinta Mazatlan. I'm going to get it right before I leave here. So it is a beautiful venue. It's going to be live music, drinks, dinner. It's going to be incredible. We're going to have bus transportation that will leave from the Embassy Suites and the Cambria. The bus service will leave around 6. The event actually starts at 6:30, but we're looking forward to seeing each of you guys there. So without taking any more of Gail's time, let me introduce Gail Lissy, Region 6 Administrator, and she'll give you a brief update of what's going on.
Alan, you can take as much time as you need. I really appreciate it. Thank y'all all for joining us this afternoon. And I would really especially like to thank all of the TTA board members as well as all of the folks here today to really make sure that you're getting the most out of this conference. I couldn't decide which session to go to a few minutes ago because there were so many good ones. And so I really appreciate all the work that everybody does to make this such a successful conference. So again, thank you very much. And I really appreciate the opportunity for joining you this afternoon. So my name is Gail Lissy. I'm the Regional Administrator for the Federal Transit Administration here in Region 6, and that includes Texas and the surrounding states, Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. And it's terrific to see so many familiar faces in the audience and several FTA recipients, transit partners, and industry suppliers. But it's also great to see so many new faces in the crowd. This morning during the breakfast sessions, the opening session this morning where you talked about generations and that sort of thing, you know, you looked around, it wasn't just a bunch of old folks who think they're young. That's my category. There's so many new faces in the audience and so much enthusiasm in this industry, and it's great to see that, and great to see a bunch of young folks join in the transit industry and really understanding the benefits of this industry and what you do for your communities. I'm just so impressed by all you do. Really, our partnership in the transit industry are what allows us to deliver these successful projects and safe systems, and this work is vital to FTA's mission of improving America's communities through public transportation. And, you know, we're here for you, essentially, and we're here to help you meet those goals for your communities. I'd like to put out a special thank you to all the operators in attendance, really providing service day in and day out in your communities, helping people get to jobs and opportunities in cities, in small rural areas I shouldn't say small rural areas, this is Texas, oh my gosh. The rural areas are massive in this state, and you put so many miles on your vehicles to make sure your communities have the services they need and people can get to where they need to go. So I really thank you for all that you do. And again, thanks to your efforts, transit ridership in the United States continues to increase, growing by more than 17% between 2022 and 2023. And that's the most recent data that's available, except for what, of course, TxDOT puts out, which is more recent. The increase reflects more Americans choosing to take transit and really more people traveling as well to work, school, healthcare, weekend activities, especially in large urban areas. Weekend ridership has gone up more or faster than weekday ridership. So you're really seeing people use public transportation in a different way than they did in their previous life. Like I should say pre-COVID. Everything is measured pre and post-COVID these days. And that's one of those things where people's travel patterns have changed as well. So here are a few of those numbers. Transit agencies provide 6.9 billion trips, an increase of more than 17% from 2022. Those same transit agencies moved passengers 35 billion miles, an increase of almost 17% in 2022. Well, that's a lot of miles and a lot of trips. So congratulations to all of you for continuing to provide these critical services. And more recently, for the transit providers in Texas, they've provided almost 230 million trips. This is just here in Texas, driving over 252 million miles in 2024, with about a 6% increase in revenue miles and ridership growth of more than 12% from 2023 to 2024. So good to see that those ridership increases are continuing, even in Texas, where they always talk about getting people out of their pickup trucks. Not everybody drives a pickup truck, and y'all are providing that service to make sure everybody can get where they need to go. And as you know, the transit systems FTA and USDOT support take many forms. Here in Texas, we see many modes, and most of those systems are supported with federal funding, including rural transit systems, demand response services, fixed route bus, BRT, bus rapid transit, light rail, and commuter rail. We've got it all here in Texas. And in fact, FTA's NTD, National Transit Database, lists 21 different types of transit service in our country. And here in Texas, we support 52 grant recipients of those transit services. At FTA, we take these relationships very seriously and appreciate our collaboration with all of you. After all, each of these services I mentioned connect people to jobs, schools, healthcare, and other services, and friends and family. It is so important to connect. And again, this morning, our presenter was talking about connections and how that's changed over time. And it's really helpful to have those face-to-face connections as time goes on. And you help provide that. It's not just somebody getting on Facebook and putting a comment or a like on something. It really is helpful for folks to get out and visit with their neighbors and go to grandma's house and make sure that they have access to schools, not just online schools, but also in-person schools. And y'all do that. You make that happen. Well, as you know, we're a little bit into a new administration, and Secretary Sean Duffy was confirmed and began his role at the U.S. Department of Transportation a little while ago. We also welcomed a new appointee at FTA, and her name is Melissa Newton. It used to be Melissa Miejas, and she was with APTA, working with them to help transit. So we're excited to have her as the Director of Legislative and Governmental Affairs. And so we are starting to build the leadership of FTA as time goes on here. The President also recently nominated former Congressman Mark Molinaro for FTA Administrator. He comes from the New York area and so is familiar with public transportation. And this appointment, of course, is subject to the Senate confirmation hearing, and so we expect that in the near future. As our new leadership arrives at FTA, we will share more information with you about the administration's priorities But as Secretary Duffy has already made clear, safety remains a top priority. While transit remains the safest surface transportation mode, we must remain vigilant about our safety mission. And over the past few years, FTA focused on ways to make transit safer and protect transit workforce. From 2018 to 2023, the fatality and injury rate for assaults on transit workers nearly doubled. That's why last September, FTA did publish a general directive calling on the nation's transit agencies to take steps to protect frontline workers. And I know many of you were doing that already, and I really appreciate all the work you've done to make sure you're keeping your people safe and keeping your passengers safe. This is just a way to gather information and document that and possibly help you identify new ways to help make sure you have a safe system that's operating in your area. So this directive calls for the nation's larger transit agencies to address the risk of assaults and report results to FTA, which we are confident will help reverse the alarming trend. The goal is very simple. No one has to go to work in fear for their lives or feel like they're not safe. So we want to help you get there. We appreciate the compliance with FTA's general directive. So far, it's resulted in about 90% of the affected transit agencies conducting a safety risk assessment. It's something you're probably doing anyway. In fact, many of those transit agencies were already doing that, but maybe you added a little bit to it as you were looking at what those statistics are and looking at maybe we can do something a little bit safer for our folks. In addition, FTA's initial analysis of agency responses to the general directive showed that about 2/3 of the transit agencies determined that safety risk strategies are necessary to reduce the risk of assaults on transit workers, and these agencies are working to roll out a variety of mitigation measures. FTA plans to provide a more in-depth analysis once it has analyzed the complete set of responses. So be looking for that. There should be something coming out on the safety side of things within FTA on our website with respect to an analysis of the results of the general directive. I'd also like to highlight the changes in the PTASP plan. It's the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan rule. Transit agencies subject to the PTASP requirements are required to address regulatory changes, mainly focusing on using safety management systems, which is a process that transit agencies use to identify and mitigate safety risks. And that needs to be included in your next agency safety plan update. So please make sure as you're updating your agency safety plan that you're making sure that you're using this safety management system in order to identify possible safety issues that you may have. So those compliance dates, of course, will vary depending on your annual review process and the date established in each plan. But as we come out and do triennial reviews, we will be looking at that as time goes on. Switching to funding, FTA manages a multi-billion-dollar portfolio of grants to TTA members. As you know, funding to states and transit agencies is primarily through three of the largest formula grant programs, the Rural Formula Program, the Urban Formula Program, and the Seniors and People with Disabilities Program. If you know the numbers, that's 5307, 5310, and 5311. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act boosted funding for these programs by over 60%, and that's leading to more and better transit because you have more money to do things, at least from the federal side. Last year in 2024, FTA awarded 313 grants to recipients in the region and obligated $1.17 billion in FTA funding. And so we're really excited about playing our role in making sure that you can receive those funds and use them for what you need to. In January, FTA published the FY25 partial apportionment tables for formula funding, and so you may have seen the $10.4 billion that's been made available for the first 5 months of the fiscal year. This funding, along with prior year funding, is available now for obligation. And we are here for you. That's what we do. We're here to make sure that you can receive those funds and get those funds awarded in a grant. Please know that we have a number of resources to assist you with developing those grants. So don't be shy about calling your FTA representative. That's what we're here for. We love to hear from you. You can also find resources on FTA's website. And one thing in particular I wanted to point out, we have what's called an FTA Recipient Award Toolkit. So please don't just submit last year's grant as this year's grant, because it may not go through the first time, because every year there's like little tweaks to what we're asking for in your TRAMS application. Go to this FTA Recipient Award Toolkit. I'll repeat it a couple more times. If you look that up, you should be able to find it. We published it in January, and it's on the website, and that is exactly what we're looking for. It steps you through step by step exactly what needs to be in each part of your application so that it goes through the first time. Wouldn't that be great? Everything's done, we check all the boxes, you check all the boxes, and we award the grant. We're looking forward to that. So please make sure you're taking a look at that toolkit. Recipient Award Toolkit. While most of FTA's funding is apportioned by formula, we know many of you also have been successful recipients of discretionary funding. Congratulations. With the change in the administration, the department is undertaking a programmatic review of the discretionary grants to ensure these programs are consistent with the administration's priorities. You may have seen the recent FY25 bill notice of funding opportunity, which has recently closed, and we expect there to be future funding opportunities throughout the year. So please keep an eye out for that, especially as Congress moves forward with funding for the rest of the year. We are looking to make sure that we get these discretionary grants processed. So please continue to submit your applications for those discretionary grants you may have already received, and look for future grants for FY25 funding. For those that have received urbanized area formula funds, you are familiar with our oversight requirements here in FTA. FTA will conduct 14 triennial reviews in the coming months. I think we're starting in April for the site visits. We've already done the workshops. The last one was in New Orleans. It just happened to be during Mardi Gras. If you got to go, congratulations. I hope you were able to make it to the session the next day. But those are really very good workshops that go through all of the items. It's an open book test, people. We give you the questions, we tell you what the answers are. You just have to make sure your programs are meeting those requirements. And I know it's not easy. And so we work with you to make sure that if there is a deficiency, that you get to a point where you resolve that deficiency, and then we close out your review, and we move on. So we do anticipate that the contractor's manual will be published and updated in the near future. The one that's there now is fine, but it's not going to cover every single thing that we're going to address as part of this year's triennial reviews, but most of it's there. So until we get the new one up and running, we're just going to have to make do with what's there, and it really covers most of the bases. Little different topic, World Cup and Olympics. These are exciting times in Texas as well as across the country. Major sporting events coming to the U.S. and Taylor Swift concerts can have a huge impact on public transportation, especially in large urban areas. Both Dallas and Houston are hosting World Cup games in 2026. And while Houston does have a rail option from the stadium to downtown and around parts of the city, the backbone of our industry is buses. And they're expected to be used to carry fans efficiently and safely from events that include not just the games, but also the fan fests and to the airport and wherever else these folks need to go. There are going to be a lot of people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and the Houston area coming to see games and they'll be coming from all over the world to see their teams play. So this is a time for transit to really shine. And I think the best way for it to shine is to almost not be noticed, that people have no problems getting where they need to go. And so these communities are currently working to make sure that the fans, the visitors, everybody will be able to move around within the cities and continue to provide transit services to those that use it every day. So it's going to be a big lift, and there may be a request for leased vehicles from somebody or additional vehicles. So right now there is no additional federal funding to help support these large events. And so there may be some folks reaching out to others to help expand their fleet to accommodate the number of passengers that are expected. So just keep that in mind, kind of in the back of your head. If you get a call from DART or Trinity Metro or DCTA or Houston Metro or Harris County, the folks in those areas, they may be needing some help. So and I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying just keep your eyes open and please be willing to help out. It is really a chance for our industry to provide and to put our best foot forward. So one final area I want to talk about is data. Everybody's favorite thing, data, GTFS. We know reporting to the NTD is not anybody's favorite task, except for maybe the people that do, no, not even them, I don't think. But the data remains vital to our program and the industry. One of the recent and exciting products, thanks to your reporting efforts, is the first set of comprehensive general transit feed specifications, the GTFS. The data is being used by trip planning services like Google and Apple Maps, as well as the transit app, to encourage and help people take transit. In fact, we were just, I don't see her, I'm sure she's here somewhere. There she is. We were looking at the transit app earlier, trying to figure out some things. So, and of course we know, because we're in the industry, that it is based on GTFS data. But if you're not, nobody knows that. And it's just something that all of your efforts to feed that information into that database are now being used to support people's needs across the country to travel on public transit. It's a great thing. So 80% of fixed route agencies are reporting their GTFS data in the first year of reporting, which is pretty good, And thanks to all transit agencies for providing this data to NTD. And in addition, DOT is using this data to build a national transit map to demonstrate how comprehensive transit service is across the U.S. So I look forward to continuing to work with all of you and support you and your programs. Really, transit ridership is on the rise across the country, and thanks to you, more and more people can take advantage of the services you provide. So again, I want to thank you, and we are here, FTA is here to help you meet your goals. It's not our money, this is your money that flows through FTA. So please keep that in mind. These are your dollars, so help us help you and get your money out to you. Couple of things that's kind of put a little kink in that right now. We are requiring that you have an updated opinion of council and an updated authorizing resolution in TRAMS, which is our grant-making software. Please make sure you get that in the system in the right place. If you don't know that, please talk to the folks that do your grants for you to make sure that they're getting that information in there. We originally had a date of March 5th to complete that. We had a lot that hadn't yet submitted their data. So that has been extended to April 4th. We don't expect there to be another extension. After April 4th, we won't be able to process your grant applications. You won't even be able to get into TRIMS to submit your grant. So, opinion of council, authorizing resolution, those are the two keys. A couple other things, and I know I'm probably running out of time. STIP. Here in Texas, please make sure you get your projects in the current STIP. And Eric is laughing over there. No, of course not. So all unobligated funds for capital and operating assistance need to be listed in the current STIP. That's not the current STIP from last year when you submitted your grant and there was some back and forth and things didn't get completed at the end of the year. It's got to be in the one that's federally approved, which right now is the 2025 to 2028 STIP. So if you got 2023 funds or 2024 funds, get them in this year's STIP ASAP, because we cannot process those grants until they're in the current STIP. Make sure your SAM registration is active. It's something you have to do annually. If the person who was doing it left, they'll be the ones that get the notification email. Oh boy, it wouldn't be the first time that somebody has retired and their SAM and then the agency SAM registration expires. So please make sure you are checking that. You can check it online, anybody can. Submit your annual certifications and assurances. That should be coming up soon. Knock on, this is wood, right? That should be available in the coming sometimes. Make sure your civil rights submissions are submitted, and if you have any questions, call your pre-award manager. And I think that's about all I've got, except for one thing. I'm going to add one more. Lapsing funds. We have a lot of recipients that are applying for their funds in the same year that they lapse. Please, please, please apply for 2 years of funds. Don't just do 1 year at a time. If you can, put both 2 years of funding into your grant applications, and let's get out of this lapsing grant cycle so that we have a little bit of breathing room when it comes to managing your grants. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Alan. Thank y'all so much.
All right, thank you, Gail. You know, I was listening to you speak, and I was thinking of the time that John Hendrickson hired me, oh my gosh, almost 20 years ago. Just started with Waco Transit and didn't know it, like a lot of people just started out. I didn't know anything about transit. So what does John do? He sends me to an FTA procurement class for my very first, FTA transit class. And I'm sitting there, and like you can imagine, I was totally overwhelmed. I mean, all the rules and all the regulations and everything they said, and apparently my body language must have said it, because somewhere through the presentation, the instructor came up to me and said, I know this is a lot. She said, but you don't have to do all this. And I kind of got excited for a second. And she said, only if you want our money. So, it's a lot, but Gail, thank you so much for being with us today. So I know we're getting close to the end, so bear with us just a little bit longer. So our last speaker is someone who really needs no introduction, but it's Mr. Paul Comfort. He's going to give us a little vision of what to look for this new year with his presentation entitled A New Year, a New Administration, and a New You. So Paul, it's all yours.
The 1950s were really the heyday of public transportation in the U.S. All the guys had come home from the war, the women were out working. My grandma was working in World War II. She was working in a bomb factory, literally. And they didn't have cars like we do back then, They didn't have 3 or 4 cars in their driveway. Most people didn't even have any car. Some of them had one. The cities were condensed. And I'm going to tell you, public transit in America was rolling in the 1950s. It really was happy days then. And it's interesting. The transit systems then were owned and operated by private companies. A lot of times they were owned and operated by the utility companies, the power companies in your city. And why do you think that was? Because most cities had a streetcar system. And these power companies had figured out how to vertically integrate their markets so they would sell the electricity to their own subsidiary that was running the streetcar down the middle of the street. Like in Baltimore, where I ran the transit system, we still had, in a lot of parts in the city, still had the rail there. It's all over the country that way. And the story is very similar to Tucson's. Rich and I were just in Tucson 2 weeks ago for the SWATA conference, the Southwest Transit Association conference. Always a great time. I know a lot of you were there as well. And I went and toured the Tucson transit system, SunTram, and they told me the story that I've heard all over, which is the public transit system in the city was run by private companies until around the mid-1970s. And then when people started getting 1 and 2 cars in their family, ridership dropped off dramatically, and they couldn't make money on it anymore. That's right. Public transit used to be a for-profit operation in the U.S., as it is still in Latin America. I was just down in Sao Paulo last year, and they still operate like we used to run, where private companies run their public transportation systems in concert with the government in some places, or like in Great Britain, the same kind of thing. But they run it, and they make a profit at it. The density of the ridership is high enough where they can do it. But then in the 1970s, ridership fell off to the point where most transit systems, like in Baltimore, my city, in Tucson, and most other cities in the country, almost all of them went belly up. They went bankrupt. And they sold their assets to the local governments. And that's why the old statement is still true today, which is, if you've seen one transit system, you've seen one transit system. Because how they were picked up by different agencies is different in every city and in every state, right? In the Northeast, we've got state agencies from CT Transit, where Ben Limmer is the head, down to New Jersey Transit. Even the New York City MTA is largely a state agency, down to MTA, where I was CEO, a state agency. I reported to the Secretary of Transportation. Then you've got city operations like Tucson, or like right here in the city we're in. I was talking with the general manager earlier today of the service here, operated by the city. So we had a good 40-year run. From 1975, 85, 95, 05, 15. Right around 2015, I started my job at the MTA in Baltimore, head of the state agency, the Maryland Transit Administration. And when I got the job there, I had just come from WMATA, Washington Metro, where I'd run the paratransit system for 5 years for a contractor based here in Texas, MV Transportation. And it was our biggest contract, $100 million. Did that for 5 years, and then I ran for county commissioner, won, and a friend of mine ran for governor, Larry Hogan. He won there, and he appointed me as the administrator of the MTA. When I got to the MTA, the CEOs across America in 2015, kind of metaphorically, we all had our hair on fire. And why is that? Because ridership was on a 5-year decline across the industry at that point, and there was no end in sight. People were saying, what is going on? We can't get people on the bus or on the train. It's going down. It was a combination of factors. Some of it was that new operators had moved into cities. See, we had a good 40-year run. We had a 40-year run where we had a monopoly on public transportation. But now new companies were coming into our cities. Some of them are no longer around. You may remember some of their names if I were to say them. But they were coming and operating privately operated public transportation in various modes. Uber was then just coming on. We had our speaker earlier today talk about that, about how Uber came on the market. And I remember them coming to visit me at the transit system there in Lyft and saying, we want to work with you. And so they were coming into cities, and transit agencies also were subject to the cost of fuel going down dramatically, and so people could drive their car more. There was lots of other factors involved. Nevertheless, MTAs and authorities and other agencies around the country could not quite figure out what to do in order to increase ridership. We all went down to Orlando for an APTA CEO conference. And I remember Nat Ford was chair that year. Nat is head of Jacksonville Transportation Authority and a great innovator in our industry. And he made a speech, and for the next year of his administration, I was on the board. He talked to us at APTA, the board members about it too. He issued a clarion call, which was, we need to change. Transit agencies in America need to change. We need to go from being a monopoly provider of public transportation in a city and change our vision to that of an aggregator, a provider and an aggregator of all the mobility services in the city. So the new, it could be that a company had just dumped a bunch of scooters in your city, or electric bikes, or there was the Ubers and the Lyfts and other providers, Via and other providers that were coming in to your city that providing some public transportation services. And he suggested we aggregate them all together. And then the next year, a Texan came up with a great idea. His name was Tom Lambert. Tom was head of Houston Metro at the time, Harris County, and he came up with an idea in concert with some consultants to totally reboot his bus network. And I've talked about it all over the world. I was just talking about it in Australia at the bus conference we were in just before Thanksgiving, Tasmania of all things. It's called the BIC Conference, the Bus Industry Confederation Conference. He had an idea which was, hey, public transportation is largely following those same routes that the streetcar companies set up in our cities back in the 1950s, where in Baltimore, for example, we were still following it in 2016. All the routes, 2/3 of our routes, went to the central business district of the city, the downtown area. 2/3 of our routes went there. There was 145,000 jobs in the central business district of Baltimore, but there were 220,000 jobs outside of that in the suburbs area. And yet we had almost, the great majority of our routes serving an area which didn't need to be served at that level anymore. And there were a lot of other issues going on with transportation at the time. And so he suggested we push the reset button and totally revamp your system based on what the needs of the public are today. And he did it, and it worked. And 7 cities copied him in 2017, and those 7 cities saw an increase in their ridership. We did it that year as well. Actually, it was in 2016. 2017, more cities did it, including Baltimore. 2018, more cities did it. And in 2019, there were so many cities that have rebooted their bus networks to look at frequency and coverage and have the right balance, that the whole industry, for the first time in a decade, saw an increase in overall ridership, including our major system in the country in New York City. I'm sure many of you are aware, but if you're not, on any given day in America, with the millions of people that ride public transportation, 40% of all rides in America on public transportation occur in one city, New York City. If you can make it there, right? So even New York City saw an increase. So we were so excited for 2020 to come, weren't we? Like, yes, finally we're on a roll. Ooh, then we got a gut punch, right? COVID. Holy moly. And then it just stopped everything dead in its tracks. What the heck, man? We were on a roll. 2020 was going to be our year. I actually had a book out that year, The Future of Public Transportation. I had an all-expense-paid 15 or 20 city book tour around the world, from Dubai to Singapore. I got one coffee chat, one coffee clatch in my hometown where I shook 40 people's hands in March of, late February actually, of 2020, and then that happened. We had to adapt to this once again. We had to adapt. We had to adapt, or, that's an interesting picture. I didn't know that was up there. We had to adapt, or we had to die, become irrelevant. Transit systems did. So now, look at what's happening. Now it's 50 years later. Tucson is actually celebrating their 50th anniversary of their transit system. It's 10 years after that time when we all went down and decided something had to be done. We needed to adapt and change and become the aggregator, and then most of us pushed the reset button on our transit system over the next few years and rebooted the bus network completely, to use a common vernacular. In Baltimore, we did it. Not only did we change the bus routes, we decided we were going to change everything. We reconfigured our bus networks. We went to 12 color-coded high-frequency routes on 15-minute headways, pulsing in and out of the central business district, and 65 community routes that would feed into them, these 15-minute headway routes. We put in suburban to suburban routes, which had never been done before, around the city, so that people didn't have to go downtown to go back up in a V and take an extra hour. We also removed 1,000 bus stops out of our network overnight, just like Houston did. We put up new signs. We designed a whole new sign system. And overnight, we went around and took all the covers off the new signs. And we had brand new, colorful, very informative signs. Now, I would have put QR codes on. We didn't at the time. Hopefully, you're doing that here on your bus network so people can look and see when the bus is going to come. But we had to change. We put in 35 intersections of transit signal priority, 5 miles of bus-only lanes, knowing that speed and frequency are what drives ridership. We changed so we would stay relevant and stay important in people's lives. I was recently in the city of Vienna, Austria. I was in Yes, it was Vienna. Yeah. And the CEO of the Vienna Transit System told me something great. She gave a speech at it was the World Passenger Festival. I was doing a book signing there. And she said, when we have all these construction projects going on and we're changing and updating our system and people are complaining about it. I was just in Las Vegas with MJ Maynard last week, and she had the same thing. This big BRT line being built, and literally the Uber driver that brought me there was complaining about the construction. I thought that was great. This has been going on for way too long, he said. So, and the guy in charge of it was telling me, yeah, everybody's complaining because it's taking so long. I said, you know what you need to do? You need to adopt the Viennese motto, which was they have on all their construction sites now, sorry, comma, not sorry. Which means, change causes disruption, but it can bring better outcomes. So that is my message to you today. And I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking to you about change in our industry and how we as people can change and improve our lives if we make a decision to do so. Sorry, not sorry. They said it's Viennese humor. The guy in Vegas told me he probably couldn't say that. It probably wouldn't be accepted very well by people. So here we are now, 5 years after that COVID event I just mentioned in 2020, right? So we're in 2025. Wow, that's wild, isn't it? Halfway through, a full quarter of the century already done. And we still haven't completely recovered, have we? I heard, I did a session earlier today on safety improvements, and one of the fellows there said that their system finally has cracked pre-COVID ridership. But most transit agents, let me ask you, if you don't mind, how many of you all are now having more riders than you did in 2019? Is there anybody here? Okay, a couple hands, that's good. But overall, the APTA statistics and what we've seen on NTD data, what she said, it is going up. What Gail said is ridership's going up, but we still haven't reached those pre-pandemic levels. We haven't recovered completely, have we? You know who else hasn't? The movies. Have you noticed that? I don't know about you, but before the pandemic, man, I loved going to the movies. It was like, a great relaxation on a Saturday afternoon to go see a matinee of the greatest movie, or on a Friday night, go out in a movie. Remember that? Going to the movies was great. Not anymore. Nobody's going to the movies. I think COVID broke the movies. It's all online now, right? The industry's nearly broken. We've moved to new streaming platforms, and more people now watch YouTube than watch regular TV. Amazing. We have a TV show, Transit Unplugged TV, and we go to a different city every month. We did one in Tucson and Vegas. We're going to Washington, D.C. next month, or later this month, actually. We film the food, fun, and culture in a city, and then we showcase their public transit system and how it connects all those things we just showed you, and how you can ride it to all those cool things we just showed you. So that show has been doing better and better. This last month, our show from Brisbane, Australia, had 238,000 views on YouTube alone. We're on some other digital platforms as well. Get this. This is in February, just last month. Do you know what the average viewership was of the Travel Channel in February, their average program? So our show on YouTube got 238,000 views. It's a travel show. It's Anthony Bourdain meets transit. The average viewership of the Travel Channel, their programs, was 138,000. So on YouTube, our show had 100,000 more views than the Travel Channel, a traditional network. Now, it doesn't mean I don't want to get on the Travel Channel. I'm actually trying to pitch some of our stuff to Discovery and Nat Geo, et cetera, and maybe the Travel Channel as well. But the point is, times are changing. Advertising dollars are changing. How we spend our time is changing based on what happens. Change is inevitable. We have to change. Gail just mentioned, there's a new administration in town, right, in Washington, D.C. I live in Maryland, very close to Washington, D.C. I was there on Capitol Hill 2 weeks ago. We were testifying before. It was APTA and the Bus Coalition and CTAA, the Community Transportation Association of America, and the group that I head up called the North American Transit Alliance, which represents the 6 largest contractors here in America. MV, as I mentioned here, We Drive You, RATP Dev, all those are kind of Texas-based companies, as well as Keolis and Transdev and Beacon, a new company out of the Philadelphia area that joined us this year. So we were there testifying before the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee's Highway and Transportation Subcommittee, from which the Reauthorization Act will come out of there. And so they're doing listening sessions right now. So we went up and told them what we wanted to listen to. But things are changing in Washington, as you know. We have a new Secretary of Transportation who wrote a letter last week to WMATA and to Amtrak. Stephen Gardner, the CEO, was just on our podcast last week, and also to the city mayor, and said, safety is our priority. We want you to focus on safety in transit. And I'm all for that personally. I think safety does need to be number one. I think that part of the reason why people aren't riding transit in big cities today is because they don't feel safe on public transportation anymore for various reasons. And there is a new day in America when it comes to safety. I'm teaching a class now at Villanova, and every week I give them, it's a graduate course, and I'm teaching them public transportation systems, and every week I give them transportation in the headline news. And every week, a new city is adding police officers, adding new gates, new fare gates that people can't jump over. It's a new day from where we were a couple years ago. People realize they need to enforce the fares. People need to feel safe on the transit systems. There's ambassador programs as well that we didn't have before. We want them to feel safe. We want to run an efficient system. We want it to be reliable on time. And we want to deliver world-class customer service. In my opinion, those are the four cornerstones of a great, successful transportation system. But there's going to be changes coming from fueling to funding to how that happens, right? We may see some changes in the low-no grant funds that come out. Nothing's been announced yet, but based on everything that I see, I would predict that there could be some changes there. And I think there will be an emphasis toward hydrogen, CNG. Again, I'm just predicting. No one's told me this, but I'm reading the tea leaves, as they say, and clean diesel. Will we stay with our current plans, that we're going to build that brand new battery electric bus garage, or are we going to pause and adjust and wait and see what happens? So what about SIG grants? What about these capital investment grants? Are they going to stay on? I know that some groups, weren't you just up there in Capitol Hill last week talking about that? Scott Berger's going to call me tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., by the way, and give me an update on it. Will they stay a thing? So times are a-changing, as Bob Dylan said back in the 1960s, and you can see where I fit on that guy's on that guy's thing from this morning, right? Whether you're old or young. But what's going to happen with funding for some of those projects we talked about and that you're looking at? Times change, and we have to decide how we are going to respond. Even in our personal lives, things change, right? And we have to adapt, right? So as I moved into my age 40s and 50s, I noticed my metabolism changing, right? So I was doing the same thing I'd always done. I eat the same way. I exercise the same amount, which is to say hardly any. and you know, I was in the low 100s, like 150 pounds or something like that at the time as I went into my 30s. And then into my 40s, I realized that I didn't realize it, but my metabolism was changing. I was like, why am I gaining like 7 or 8 pounds a year, every year for 12 years? And then finally it hit me. Like 2 years ago. What the heck, man? I got to do something about this. My body is definitely adjusting, and you can tell. I always visualize myself as a skinny guy because I was for so long. But then things changed. So I got to grab it. I got to say, okay, I got to shake myself awake and say, I know I'm super focused on work, but I got to focus on my personal life too. And so I get up every morning now for the last 6 months. I go for a walk, right? Got to get the body moving early in the morning, right? Trying to cut down on carbs and sugars and processed foods so I can lose weight. 25 down, 50 more to go to get all that crap off. I had to adjust and change or die. H.G. Wells says, adapt or perish. Now as ever is nature's inexorable imperative. Change, adapt, or perish. Let me ask you this question. How many of you in this room have a job you love? How many of you love your job? Now, I won't ask you to raise your hand for this, but the next question is, how about many of you, maybe not so much? How many of you, as part of your job responsibilities, think it to yourself, don't raise your hand, your boss might be here. How many of you, as part of your job responsibilities, are doing things you don't care for, or maybe believe you're not best suited for? This is not what I'm best suited for. Should you adapt to what your job is doing? You see how we're shifting right now? I'm shifting, right? From societal change to personal change. Do you mind if I step on your toes? And by the way, everything I say today is just from me as a man. It doesn't represent any of my employers or people that pay me money for various things. So I'm just talking to you from my personal experience. Should you adapt or dig in your heels? A while ago, I was general manager of a bus operation for a company that no longer exists. They were bought up by other companies, and those companies still exist today, and they're very big. I was operating for a private contractor, and I had over 10 contracts under me. We had public transportation, fixed route, paratransit, we had motor coaches, we had all kinds of operations. Had a limousine service, we had school buses for a while, lots of operations, commuter bus. And I had P&L responsibility. How many of you know what that means? Profit and loss statement in the private sector, right? So I was responsible for my P&L statement to my boss, who was the COO of the company. And every month, I had to write a deviation report. And that report was if my budget or if my expenditures were below or above by 5% what the budget was, I had to write a justification as to why. Well, and I had to also write what I was going to do to change it, to fix it, because we needed to stay to budget, right? So I would write this report. I'd get the P&L. I had 10 contracts, so I had 10 profit and loss statements I had to go through. It would take me 2 days to do this every month. I would go through and review them all. Then I had to go and talk to the people who actually manage those services and say, what the heck, man? What's going on here? Why are you 16% over on salaries? What's all this overtime? Well, boss, blah, 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 blah. We had some extra contracts with the Ravens last month, and yeah, but where's the corresponding revenue to offset that? And all the questions, I had to dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and I thought, man, I wrote a great response, This is going to be great. He's going to love it. Jeff's going to love my response, Oh, my gosh. His responses were brutal. It never was good enough. I never had the right answers. What in the world is wrong with me? Why can't I figure out my own operation? And, it's funny? In person, he was a great guy. Very nice, friendly. We'd go to ball games together. But, man, he had a poison pen. I won't ask you to raise your hand, but how many of you ever had somebody like that you worked for? And so I was like, oh, my gosh, what am I going to have to do to figure this out? And so I had to dig deeper. And if you know me, I'm a generalist. I'm not a specifist. And so my natural inclination is I think and adapt inductively. Things come to me and I come up with trends, which is why the job I have now is pretty good. I'm not deductive by nature. That's my wife. Break everything apart, analyze it, chop it up into little pieces and figure it out. How many of you all think you're deductive? You break things up and analyze things real good. Anybody? How many of you are inductive, more like me, where you just kind of pull it all in and you come up with, okay, this is where I should be going. Yeah. So I had to become deductive. I had to go against my nature. Was I going to adapt and change, or was I going to resist this drive at my job to do that? Well, obviously, if I wanted to stay employed, which I did at the time, I was going to adapt. So I was like, I hate this. I remember going home every day, not just because of that, but other stuff too, and just not being happy with my job. But I dug deeper, and I dug deeper, and I went out into the shop, and I went into the shop garage, and I talked to the shop manager and said, why do we have $235,000 of inventory in here? You're budgeted to have $150,000. Well, Paul, we have 16 different types of vehicles. You've got 10 different contracts. We got all this. All right, I'm going to go through your friggin' list of assets, and we're going to go through them line by line because my ass is on the line here, and I'm going to figure out what's going on. Well, we're going to have to cut this. We're going to have to do that. We're going to have to do that. No, you're going to move this. We're going to move this off the books, in the books, out of the books, whatever. We're going to have to do just-in-time inventory. You're not going to be able to carry so much. You're going to have to bring it in. All right, now I'm going to go figure out what's going on with our fuel. Why is our fuel bill so high? All right, well, this, that, and the other. Well, we need to go out for a bid, get some cheaper prices on fuel. You get the drift? I had to really dig into the operation in ways that I did not want to. But slowly it began to dawn on me, I'm really learning the levers of power, how to adjust things in this agency. So when I'm sitting at my desk, I kind of know if I push this button, that thing over there moves. If I push this button, that thing over there moves. And this job and this responsibility that I despised because it was against my nature, I actually began to enjoy and began to see the value in what I was learning by this brutal dictator of a boss that was making me do something that I hated to do. But it made me so much better. And it made me ready for the next job, which was the job of my life. It's amazing. Yeah, so after I left, you know what I did? Learning to be out of my, quote, comfort zone, right? It's my last name. I wrote Jeff a letter and said, thank you so much for making me put my nose in the books so deep that now I know transportation. I know how to make it work, baby. I can make it rise like a conductor or go down. I can lift up the bassoons or put down the violins, right? I became a conductor that understood how transportation and how government works. This was a private sector, but I got the drift of it. My next job was a county administrator. I had to get out of there so bad I ran for state's attorney, and I lost. But I got the job as county administrator. It was amazing. Over the state attorney's budget, too, by the way. It was awesome. And so I use those things I learned to dive into all the various departments of county government, right? Planning and zoning, parks and recreation, the Board of Education. We're going to audit your budget, all this stuff. It was amazing. I learned how things worked in these agencies. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I ran for county commissioner and won in my county as the top vote getter, and my buddy ran for governor, and he said, Paul, we need you to come. You're an attorney, you've run big government agencies, and you've got 25 years in transportation. Come up and run the MTA. It's the worst run state agency in the state of Maryland. That's what he told me, sitting on his couch in his office. And so I did, and I got to the MTA, and it's massive, $1 billion budget, 5,000 employees and contractors. I remember meeting with our regional administrator for those quarterly meetings and all. And so I took 100 days, and I dug my nose in to every little detail of the agency, and it was fantastic because I knew where to look, I knew what to do. They couldn't buffalo me. I knew how transit operated. All because I changed and adapted to something that I hated. But I learned it, and it made me so much better. I've got a chapter in my upcoming book called Do Not Despise the Day of Small Beginnings. And that's an old quote from the Bible, but it basically means, hey man, you start small, but if you take your time and look around and learn some, you'll become really good at what you're doing. And then, if you want to move up in the world, you'll have the opportunity and you'll be ready for prime time when prime time comes. So, let me ask you a question. How are you preparing for larger responsibilities? Personally, what are you doing? It's 4:47. We got 13 minutes, I know. But I'm going to go into the final third, the final coda of my presentation today. How are you personally preparing for what's coming? Do you want to move up? Are you interested in moving up and having more influence in your life? I believe you can uncover a version of yourself that operates at full throttle. A version brimming with untapped potential, bold energy, and incredible purpose. Here's the truth. Everything you need to live and work at your highest level is already within you. Think of it like a personal treasure, hidden in plain sight. Just as the adventurers of old followed the treasure map to find the X spot that marked where the hidden treasure is, you too have an internal treasure map, a roadmap that is unique to you. Let me take the next 10 minutes and just give you a little taste of how you can find that. I'm serious, how you can follow that trail in your life, inside of you, an internal map, to find really a map to self-actualization on Maslow's hierarchy. It is where you can find what is your individual X factor. It's the intersection of your deepest interests and your natural strengths. Your X factor is where your passions and talents coalesce, creating an unstoppable synergy that will drive you towards your fullest potential. Unlocking this X factor is like striking gold. Once tapped, it will gush out with energy, clarity, and purpose. Living from this place enables you to align your life around what matters most and empowers you with sustainable momentum and to thrive in ways you've only dreamed about. Let me show you how to uncover your treasure map, navigate its twists and turns, and unlock the life you were meant to live with just a few simple steps, some practical steps to analyze your strengths. And it'll help you live with authenticity. The ancient Greeks called this dunamis. It is the explosive power capable of fueling a life of joy, meaning, and impact. How many of you all want a life of joy, meaning, and impact? I know I do, man. We only have one time around this world, right? And we are, as Shakespeare said, all the world is a stage. This is not practice. There is no practice in life. This is real life. However old you are, whatever your genetic traits are, whatever the diseases you have in your body, you have an X amount of time to live and make a difference in this world. I suggest that you get to it if you haven't already started, or if you have started, that you align yourself with your internal strengths so that you can burst out with this powerful life. Just this last weekend, I was at a friend of mine, her retirement party from the state of Delaware. And her daughter, Jessica, who's now in her 30s, was good friends with my son, Joseph, when they were growing up. And I hadn't seen her for a while, so I checked in with her. I said, Jessica, how's it going? What are you up to now? She's a mom with a couple, I think 3 kids now. And she said this. Now, I'm working on a book, and the book is entitled Finding Your X Factor. It's where your interests and abilities intersect. And she said, Mr. Paul, I am in the best place in my life. I have found the place where my interests and abilities intersect. And I said, what? That's exactly what I'm writing the book about. Those are the exact words I'm using. Tell me about it. She said, well, I always was good at spreadsheets. Everybody told me I was good at spreadsheets. And I am good at spreadsheets. But I didn't want to just work with spreadsheets. That felt more like an administrative assistant job. I wanted to lead people with that skill. So now I've found a job where I am managing teams of people that are integrating into companies around the country. We send our trainers and our technicians there, and I manage their schedules. I assign them to where they're going. I oversee them on the road. I'm able to really live from a place where I'm happy about what I'm doing day to day. And I said, wow, Jessica, I'm going to interview you more fully for this book. So I'm going to skip all the cool stuff because Alan's standing right to my side. You'll have to wait till the next time I speak or you get to hear it. I've changed all my keynotes, by the way, over the next 6 months to this topic where I'm going to dive more into it because I'm thrilled about kind of navigating this as I work on this book. But let me just suffice it to say that that is where you should look. Let me give you 2 or 3 real practical steps over the next 2 or 3 minutes. One is there's a book called Strength Finder. The idea is identifying what your strengths are. You may not need a book to do it. I read the book. I thought it was amazing. That helped me identify my strengths. When I was a kid, I remember when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, I just wanted to make a difference in the world. That was my passion. I wanted to make a difference. I remember being in 7th grade social studies class, and all these tractors were going by our 7th grade class, and they were all going to Washington, D.C. to protest Jimmy Carter's policies. They were farmers riding there. And I told my, our teacher, man, it's amazing how they're making such a difference. That's what I want to do. I want to make a difference in the world. And he told me, you're too young. You can't make a difference. Once you're 18, you can make a difference. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, yeah? And so that kind of spurred me on. I started doing all kinds of things, that ended up me being head of the Governor's Youth Advisory Council and president of my student college government. But I started writing letters to the editor at age 12 because it was my interest to make a difference and my ability to communicate intersecting in that spot. And it was successful. I ended up getting gigs to write for magazines and newspapers, all kinds of stuff, as a teenager. So that's what I'm suggesting you do. Over the next week or two, sit down and think about yourself. What are my real skills and abilities? What if I had to boil them all down, what are they? Like mine's communication, I think, and team building, connecting people, networking. And then what am I interested in? What would I do? What do I do for my hobbies? What are my interests? What do I do that I don't get paid for? Like I worked in radio for 16 years, had a talk show called Conference Corner. I got paid $25 a week. Do you think I was doing it for the money? No. I did it because I loved it. So find that and then find where they intersect. Draw a circle and say, that's what I'm going to focus on. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your conference.
All right. Maura, I know you've got to run some errands, but can I get you to come up here for just a second? This guy hasn't just been an incredible host, but he's also like Father of the Year. This guy, during this whole conference, he's been running his kids to T-ball practice and all kinds of stuff. So, right here.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. And if you're lucky, you might get to meet my daughter tonight, so she might come out and join us. So I hope you guys had a good conference. Again, thank you guys for joining us here in McAllen. It's been great for us to have you. I told Alan, whenever you guys want to come back, we'll be happy to open our doors to you guys. I also wanted to provide you a little bit of information. I know Alan's been murdering the name of our facility that we're taking you today. It's Quinta Mazatlan, and the executive director shared a little bit of information with me. It was opened in 2006 as a mansion to restore our native habitat, and they provide about environmental education for about 20,000 students. It was previously owned by 2 families, each for 30 years. The first family was a Matthews family from the 30s to the 60s, and then the Schultz family from the 60s to the 90s, and then the third family is the City of McAllen family that has owned it originally 9 acres and now expanding to 25. So in that 25 acres, there's going to be a center for urban ecology. So the city has partnered with the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, and they've partnered with us. So we're going to have a park and ride facility as well that's under construction. So we're eager to put that into place, hopefully in early 2026. It's a wonderful venue. We invite you to come out tonight. The festivities start around 6:30. The buses will queue up by the Embassy Suites and the A-Loft around 6, and then we'll leave shortly after that, and we'll run those continuously throughout the night to get people over and back. Again, we hope you can join us. It should be a good night of fun, and looking forward to it.
So before we conclude here real quickly, I just want to find out, let me see by a show of hands, how many people, this was your first time to McAllen? How was the experience? So thank you, Mario. Thank you for being a gracious host, and again, you guys have been fantastic.